Hi, welcome. Enjoy the content, subscribe, and turn on notifications.
Patrick never thought his son Ethan's 5th birthday would be the day his life completely fell apart. He'd woken up early that September Saturday, excited and full of energy, preparing every detail of the party with the care of a dad who wanted to see his son smile on his face all day long. The house in the Charlotte, North Carolina suburb was decorated with blue and red balloons, superhero themes scattered everywhere, and the smell of chocolate cake baking in the oven filled the rooms with that comforting feeling of home. At 38, Patrick was a car salesman at the biggest dealership in the region, a charismatic guy who could talk to any kind of customer, with a natural gift for making people feel comfortable and trust him. That same skill was what made him one of the top performers on the team, always hitting his targets, always getting praise from his manager. But none of that mattered as much as the family he'd built with Lauren. Lauren, his 35-year-old wife, was a marketing manager at a tech company downtown. They'd met 10 years ago at a corporate event, and Patrick had been captivated by her intelligence, the way she spoke about marketing strategies with passion in her eyes, her spontaneous laugh that lit up any room. They got married 2 years later, and Ethan was born 3 years after that, completing what Patrick had always believed was the perfect family. He worked hard at the dealership, sometimes 6 days a week, to make sure Lauren and Ethan had everything they needed. She, in turn, threw herself into her career, often staying late at the office or attending team happy hours that stretched deep into the night. Patrick never questioned it. Trust was the foundation of their relationship, or at least, that's what he thought. That morning, as he tied the last balloons in the backyard, Patrick watched Lauren through the kitchen window. She was setting up the tables with colorful tablecloths, wearing that floral dress he always said looked beautiful on her. There was something off about her behavior, a feverish energy, a brightness in her eyes he hadn't seen in months. She checked her phone every few minutes, smiled at the screen, typed quickly, then tucked it back into her purse. A strange pang hit Patrick's chest, but he pushed the thought away. It was party day, a day for joy, there was no room for unfounded suspicions. Guests started arriving around noon. Kids ran through the yard, parents chatted in small groups, grandparents took endless photos of Ethan playing with his friends. Patrick was at the grill, flipping burgers and hot dogs, telling jokes to his brothers-in-law, being the perfect host he always was. Lauren moved among the guests with trays of drinks and polite smiles, but Patrick noticed she kept checking her phone obsessively, and each time she did, her face lit up in a way he couldn't quite understand. It was almost 3 in the afternoon when the doorbell rang. Patrick was arranging chairs for the cake cutting and didn't pay much attention at first. But then he heard Lauren's voice, sharp and nervous, coming from the front door. He turned and saw a uniformed delivery person holding a stunning bouquet of red roses, huge, the kind that cost at least $200. Lauren stood in the doorway, eyes wide, hands trembling slightly as she took the flowers. Patrick dropped the chairs and walked toward the door, curiosity slowly turning into something heavier, darker. Ethan, always curious and energetic like any 5-year-old, ran up to his mom and shouted with the innocent clarity of a child who doesn't understand subtlety, "Mom, Mom! Who sent the flowers? They're so pretty. Let me see the card." Lauren practically yanked the card from the center of the bouquet and tried to hide it behind her back, but it was too late. Several guests had stopped talking and were staring at them. Patrick's mother, who'd been helping in the kitchen, came out wiping her hands on a dish towel and commented in her loud, characteristic voice, "What beautiful flowers, Lauren. Patrick, you outdid yourself this time. So romantic." Patrick felt his blood turn to ice. He hadn't sent those flowers. His gaze met Lauren's, and what he saw there made him stop breathing for a second. Panic. Pure panic in the eyes of the woman he loved. She tried to laugh, a forced, shrill laugh that sounded fake even to the least attentive ears, and said quickly, "Oh, it must be a delivery mix-up. You know how it is, they always get addresses wrong." But her voice shook, and she avoided looking directly at Patrick. Patrick walked slowly toward her, his heart pounding so hard he could hear his pulse in his ears. "Let me see the card, sweetheart," he said, keeping his voice calm, almost casual, but there was steel beneath those words. Lauren hesitated, clutching the card to her chest, but she couldn't refuse in front of all the friends and family without looking completely suspicious. With reluctant fingers, she handed him the small white envelope. Patrick opened it and read aloud, his voice low but each word hitting like a punch to the stomach, "To the woman who changed my life. Every moment with you is worth it. T." The world around him seemed to slow down. The noise of the children playing became a distant hum. The voices of adults chatting turned into a muffled echo. Patrick reread the card 3 times, as if the words might change meaning if he stared hard enough. Who was T? Why was another man sending romantic, expensive, intimate flowers to his wife on the birthday of their own son? He looked up and found Lauren, pale, lips trembling, hands nervously clasped in front of her body. "Who's T?" Patrick asked, and his voice came out louder than he intended. A few nearby guests turned, curious. Lauren forced another fake smile and rushed out, "Patrick, don't be ridiculous. I told you, it's a mistake. I'll call the florist and complain." She tried to take the card back, but Patrick held it firm and slipped it into his pants pocket. "We'll talk later," he said, low, just for her to hear, then turned and walked back to the guests, smiling, pretending everything was fine, that this embarrassing moment was just a silly misunderstanding. But inside, his mind was racing, connecting dots he'd ignored for months. The important meetings that stretched late into the night. The team happy hours that happened 2-3 times a week. The weekend business trips. The way Lauren had grown physically distant from him, always too tired, always with a headache, always with an excuse to avoid intimacy. The lunch breaks she started extending to go to the gym, returning with flushed skin and bright eyes, but without the smell of sweat, without looking like she'd actually worked out. Patrick spent the next 2 hours on autopilot. He sang happy birthday with false enthusiasm, cut the cake, served guests, took photos with Ethan on his shoulders, thanked everyone for coming. Lauren stood beside him at times, but there was a physical and emotional distance between them that any observant person could see. She barely looked at him. Her hands trembled when she held the knife to cut the cake. She spilled juice twice, distracted, always checking her phone, always nervous. When the last guest finally left, it was nearly 7 p.m. Ethan was exhausted, sugar-high and happy, playing with his new toys in the living room. Patrick asked their teenage neighbor Sarah, who sometimes babysat Ethan, to take him upstairs and stay with him for a few hours. He gave her $50 and said it was important. Sarah, sensing the tension in the air, simply nodded and took Ethan upstairs. Patrick locked the front door. He picked up the bouquet of roses, which Lauren had placed in a vase in the kitchen, and carried it to the dining room table. Then he sat down, placed the card beside the vase, and stared silently at Lauren, who stood in the middle of the room, hugging herself as if she were cold, despite the September heat. "Who's T, Lauren?" Patrick asked again, and this time his voice was too calm, too controlled, and that was more terrifying than if he'd been screaming. "Patrick, I already told you, it's a mix-up. Don't lie to me." He stood up, and Lauren instinctively stepped back. "Don't insult me by lying to my face after 10 years together." Lauren started crying, tears streaming down her face, but Patrick didn't feel pity. He felt anger, a cold, calculated anger that made his movements precise. He walked over to her purse, which was lying on the sofa, and picked it up before she could react. "Patrick, no," she started, but he'd already pulled her phone from inside. "What's the password?" he asked. "I'm not going to." "Lauren, I swear to God, if you don't give me the password right now, I'm breaking this phone and hiring a private investigator first thing tomorrow morning. You choose." She swallowed hard and whispered the numbers. Patrick unlocked the phone and began scrolling. At first he found nothing, but he wasn't stupid. He'd sold cars to hundreds of people, many trying to hide purchases from their spouses, and he knew how people concealed things on their phones. He checked apps, looking for hidden folders, privacy settings. And then he found it, a disguised folder in the messaging app, labeled Trevor, Work. Patrick opened it and felt like he'd been punched in the stomach. Messages. Hundreds of them. Photos. Audio files. All there, documented, explicit, detailed. Conversations about meetups at cheap motels near the airport. Plans for extended lunch breaks on Wednesdays and Fridays. Photos of Lauren in lingerie Patrick had never seen, clearly bought specifically for another man. Messages saying, "I can't wait to feel you again, my husband's traveling this weekend, we can spend the night together, you make me feel alive in a way I've never felt before." Patrick read it all. Every message, every photo, every audio clip. Lauren was sitting on the floor now, sobbing, but he didn't look at her. He just kept reading, absorbing every detail, feeling his 10-year life unravel word by word. The affair had started 6 months ago. 6 months of lies. 6 months of important meetings, team happy hours, business trips. Trevor was Lauren's director of sales at her company, 42, also married, with 2 kids. He held power over her, technically her indirect boss. The messages revealed they met 2, sometimes 3 times a week. Cheap motels. Roadside inns. Once even in the company parking lot after hours. Patrick felt sick. He ran to the bathroom and threw up. When he came back, Lauren was still on the floor, shaking. He said nothing. Just grabbed his own phone and started taking pictures of everything. He emailed the photos to himself for backup. Uploaded them to iCloud. Sent them to a trusted friend, Mark, his coworker at the dealership, with a simple message, "Save this for me. I'll need it later." Only then did he look at Lauren. "Trevor," he said, and his voice was dead, emotionless. "The director of sales. Married. 2 kids. Your boss." Lauren nodded, unable to speak. 6 months, Patrick continued. 6 months you looked me in the eyes every night and lied. 6 months you slept in the same bed as me after being with him. 6 months you pretended to be my wife, my son's mother, while you were sleeping with another man in cheap motels. Patrick, I'm sorry, No, he raised his hand. I don't want to hear it. I don't want your apologies. I don't want your excuses about how the marriage was bad or how lonely you felt or any other bullshit you were planning to say. I'll end it with him. Lauren screamed, desperate. I promise, I'll end it now, I'll delete everything, we can do therapy, we can fix this. Patrick laughed, but it was a bitter laugh, without humor. You think I'm going to stay with you after this? You really think you have any chance of fixing what you destroyed? He turned and walked to the bedroom. Grabbed a pillow and a blanket. I'm sleeping on the couch tonight. Tomorrow morning, you leave this house. That night, Patrick didn't sleep. He lay on the living room couch, staring at the ceiling, planning. He wasn't impulsive when it came to big decisions, but once he made one, he was relentless. At 5 a.m., he called James Chen, a divorce attorney who'd bought a car from him 2 years earlier. He briefly explained the situation. James said he could meet him at the office at 9 a.m., even though it was Sunday. At 6, Patrick called Mark and asked him to come pick up Lauren. He didn't want her in the house when he returned from the lawyer. Mark arrived at 7, helped Lauren pack a suitcase quickly as she cried, and took her to a hotel. Ethan was still asleep, unaware of the chaos that had shattered his family. At James Chen's office, Patrick presented everything, the photos of the messages, screenshots, the card from the flowers, the history of the meetups. James flipped through the documents with a serious expression and finally said, Patrick, you have a very strong case. North Carolina is an equitable distribution state, but infidelity can definitely influence decisions about spousal support. With this evidence, we can argue Lauren caused the marriage to end through marital misconduct. What about Ethan's custody? Patrick asked, and his voice cracked slightly when he mentioned his son. We're going for primary custody for you. We have evidence that Lauren prioritized the affair over her parental responsibilities. Look here, James pointed to one of the messages on the screen. She canceled her father-in-law's birthday dinner because Trevor was available that night. Here, she lies to you saying she has an important meeting, but she's actually at a hotel. We'll document every time she put the affair above family. We'll hire a private investigator to get additional photographic evidence if needed. Patrick nodded. Do whatever it takes. But Patrick did something else, something James didn't officially recommend, but didn't stop him from doing. That afternoon, Patrick created an anonymous email. He didn't use his name, left no trace. He sent an email to Trevor's wife, Amanda, whom he found easily through Facebook. In the email, he attached selected screenshots of the conversations between Lauren and Trevor, including the photo of the flower card, compromising photos, and explicit messages detailing hotel meetups with specific dates and times. The bomb exploded within 48 hours. Amanda immediately filed for divorce and, more importantly, she had connections in HR at the company where Trevor and Lauren worked. She reported the case as an inappropriate relationship between a supervisor and subordinate, which clearly violated company policy. The internal investigation was swift and brutal. Trevor, as the director and person in power, was deemed the primary culprit. He was fired within a week. Lauren received a formal warning and was transferred to another department, losing her recent promotion and taking a pay cut. When Lauren found out Patrick had exposed the affair to Trevor's wife, she called him in a frenzy, screaming, crying, accusing him of cruel revenge. Patrick listened in silence and then said only, "You destroyed our family. I just made sure you didn't walk away unscathed while I suffered alone. Actions have consequences, Lauren. You're learning that now." The divorce process was contentious. Lauren tried to negotiate, asked for couples therapy, begged for a second chance. But Patrick was unshakable. James Chen built a meticulous case. They hired a private investigator who documented Lauren entering hotels during work hours before anything came to light, proving the pattern of behavior. They presented credit card records showing spending on romantic hotels and restaurants Lauren never mentioned. They gathered witness statements who'd seen her with Trevor in clearly romantic contexts. The custody hearing was especially hard. Patrick had to sit in the courtroom and listen to Lauren's lawyer argue she was a good mother, that the affair didn't affect her parenting ability, that Ethan needed his mother. But then James Chen presented the messages where Lauren canceled commitments with Ethan to be with Trevor. Messages where she lied about being in meetings when she was actually at hotels. Records showing she missed Ethan's school Christmas performance because she was on a business trip that was really a romantic weekend with Trevor in Asheville. The judge, a middle-aged woman named Deborah Morrison with 3 adult children, looked at Lauren with clear disapproval when she saw the evidence. She asked Lauren directly, "Mrs. Parker, were you in an extramarital relationship while your son was at important school events?" Lauren, with tears in her eyes, admitted yes. "And did you repeatedly lie to your husband about your whereabouts?" Again, Lauren had to admit. Judge Morrison's decision was clear and forceful. Patrick was granted primary custody of Ethan. Lauren would have supervised visitation at first, then alternating weekends without supervision, but Ethan's primary residence would be with his father. As for assets, the house, bought before the marriage and registered solely in Patrick's name, remained his. North Carolina follows equitable distribution, but the judge considered Lauren's marital misconduct when dividing other assets. Most significantly, Lauren received no spousal support. The judge specifically cited the proven infidelity and the fact that Lauren had the means to support herself through her job. On the other hand, Lauren was ordered to pay child support proportional to her income. Lauren left the courthouse shattered. She'd lost custody of her son, the house, community respect, and most of her assets. Trevor, who'd promised to stand by her, ended the relationship via text as soon as he was fired, blaming her for ruining his life and blocking her on all social media. Lauren tried calling, begging, but he'd vanished completely from her life. In the months that followed, Patrick's life slowly rebuilt. It wasn't easy. There were nights he cried alone after putting Ethan to bed, processing the betrayal, the loss of the 10 years he'd invested in the marriage, the memories now tainted by lies. But he didn't break. He kept going to work at the dealership, where his co-workers quietly supported him. He started therapy, something he never imagined he'd do, but which turned out to be essential for processing his anger and hurt. He resumed running every morning before Ethan woke up, lost the 15 pounds he'd gained over the past few years, felt stronger physically and mentally. Ethan adapted surprisingly well, considering the circumstances. Patrick was honest with his son in an age-appropriate way, explaining that mommy and daddy didn't live together anymore, but that they both loved him very much. Patrick's parents were an incredible support, picking Ethan up from school on days Patrick worked late, preparing dinners, providing stability and love. Lauren sent regular messages, at first trying to reconcile, then just begging for more time with Ethan, finally accepting reality and limiting herself to coordinating visitation. She'd lost clients at work due to rumors that inevitably spread through Charlotte's professional community. Her name was tainted in the industry. She had to move into a small apartment across town, far from everything she knew. 6 months after the divorce, on a March morning, Patrick was at the dealership when he received a long message from Lauren. She said she'd started therapy, was working on herself, understood the gravity of what she'd done, that Trevor had been a terrible mistake, that she'd destroyed the best thing she'd ever had for a hollow illusion. She asked if there was any possibility, someday, perhaps far in the future, that they could try again, not for marriage, but for Ethan, to be a family again. Patrick read the message 3 times. He felt that familiar pang in his chest, not pain like before, but something close to pity. He typed a short reply, "Lauren, I wish you the best on your healing journey. But what we had ended the moment you chose another man over our family. I've rebuilt myself, Ethan is happy, and I won't go back. Focus on being the best mother you can be during your visits. That's the only relationship between us that still matters." He hit send, then, after a moment of hesitation, blocked her number. Any future communication would be only through the co-parenting app the lawyer had set up. That afternoon, Patrick sold an SUV to a client named Jennifer, a 36-year-old English teacher, also divorced, mother to a 7-year-old girl. They talked longer than necessary, discovered they lived in the same neighborhood, that their kids attended nearby schools. Patrick found himself genuinely laughing for the first time in months. When Jennifer was leaving, she turned and said, "You seem like a good dad, Patrick. Your son is lucky." He smiled and replied, "Thank you. I try." 2 weeks later, Patrick ran into Jennifer at the park where he took Ethan to play on Saturdays. They talked while the kids played, had coffee together the following week, began seeing each other casually and without pressure. Patrick wasn't in a hurry. He'd learned rebuilding takes time, that trust is built slowly, that he didn't need to fill the void Lauren left immediately. The flowers Trevor had sent that fateful day were still stored in a box in the attic, dried and wilted. Patrick kept them not as a reminder of pain, but as a symbol of transformation. They represented the end of an illusion and the beginning of a harsh, necessary truth. Sometimes he looked at that box and thought about how a simple bouquet of roses had revealed 6 months of lies, how an anonymous card had shattered a decade of marriage, how the truth, no matter how painful, is always better than living in a comfortable lie. Patrick had learned that being betrayed doesn't define who you are. What defines a man is how he responds when the worst happens, how he protects those he loves, how he rises after being knocked down. He'd chosen not to be a victim forever, not to carry the weight of Lauren's betrayal as a cross for the rest of his life. He'd chosen dignity, chosen Ethan, chosen himself. And in that choice, In that moment of decision in the dining room when he picked up Lauren's phone and decided not to ignore the red flags, not to pretend everything was fine, not to accept crumbs of respect and love, in that moment, Patrick truly changed his own life. Trevor's flowers were just the catalyst. The real change came from within, from the courage to face the truth, the strength to protect his son, the wisdom to know that some chapters must end for new ones to begin. And Patrick was ready for the next chapter, with Ethan beside him, head held high, heart still capable of loving, but now wiser, stronger, more aware of his own worth. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss any updates. See you next time.